702.
You're listening to the best of The Money Show.
The Money Show.
Welcome to the best bits of The Money Show, a digest of some of the most important insights, thoughts, comments, interviews, and maybe just the best jokes of The Money Show over the last week. If you'd like to hear more, please go to our website or go to any podcast app and search for The Money Show. So often there'll be someone in your life who maybe could benefit with hearing it, so maybe do just share it with them, send it along on WhatsApp or whatever. To start, some of the news stories that we thought were very important this week in addressing Parliament during a presentation on the annual report of the Reserve Bank, the Governor, Anthonyrajah, for the first time just sort of acknowledging that there was a little bit of tension between him and the Finance Ministry, or between the bank and the Finance Ministry, rather, over the decision by the Monetary Policy Committee to target the lower end of the inflation target. So, interesting comments from him. The JSE confirming on Thursday that the Group CEO, Leila Fourie, is retiring at the end of March. Valdine Reddy will be taking over from the 1st of April next year, and the US government shut down in its second week. Now, no signs of a deal at all between the President, Donald Trump, and the Democrats to end the crisis. Tonight, we bring you a mixture of stories from the world of money from the week that has been. This week's book review, Dr. Ongama Mtimka, the acting director of the Raymond Mhlaba Center for Governance and Leadership, he discussed a classical work. It's called The Power Elite. It's by C. Wright Mills. It looks at how political, economic, and military leaders often form a small, quite interconnected group that can shape the direction of a society. And he was writing about the United States, but think for a moment of the people who really govern in South Africa and the sectors they come from, and you can understand the resonance. Here's Ongama Mtimka.
I found myself, as I was grappling with the political economy of South Africa and wanting to understand at the core of our problems and potential solutions, what are the core issues? And I stumbled upon what I could only use, a term used by some people branch called power constellations. And then started reading up on that and remembered that, in fact, somebody who contributed to thinking about, this concept of concentrated power in countries, the US in particular, was Sir Wright Mills. And I've spent time reading about, what he says about the power elite and their interests and what they want. And it's been amazing watching developments of the Matlanga Commission and finding how it actually corresponds with what he talks about as the military in the US, but to us, maybe a nexus between underworld elements and security. So a underworld security nexus of sorts, so a complex of sorts. So, yeah, it's been fascinating and it's got interesting lessons for us today.
I mean, you talk about the Matlanga Commission. We see, warlords may be too strong a word, but you see people who are they have control over men with guns. Let me call them like that. And both kind of the criminal element and the police element. That's what they have in common. And we're kind of seeing a dispute like that playing out right in front of us right now.
Yeah, so interesting. It's interesting you are shy of using this word warlord. So Mills asks himself, what are the conditions that allow men of war to subject themselves to the power of civilian leaders? And what actually creates the conditions for them to step up in the fore and want to resolve issues? So as I listen to the rhetoric, the well-calculated strategy that Mkhwanazi used, which I was very supportive of, to me it actually matches, because the rhetoric is, we are ready, let's meet on the field. And it underscores an answer for Mills that says, well, the men of war, when they perceive that their civilian leaders can interfere with the work of state security in such a way that national security can be undermined, they can, in fact, step up in the fore and begin to stamp their power. And it's interesting that Mkhwanazi does what he does, saying that he was being responsive to a very violent counter-offensive, and I'm paraphrasing, by people they had seen had been killing people, political killing staff team and the organized underworld that were works with them. But yeah, so it's an interesting one. I think for me, what is also scary is now the warlords proper, those outside the state, outside the security, attempting to claim space for them, whether it's in economic sectors like construction or in dangerous activities, as Marx would say, in moving drugs and trafficking, or protecting turf in different sectors. So it's an interesting thing in that sense.
One of the key tests for me in a society is whether the elites change. In other words, whether one group of people are able to concentrate power and replicate it. So Russia's a good example. If you're not born into that elite, you're probably not going to get into that elite. The same could be true in South Africa before 1994. Or whether your elite can change. Now, I would argue that for a long time, the United States was a good example of whether people could fall out of the elite and go into the elite. I think that that's become harder now. In our elite, can people fall out of it? Can people go into it?
Thank you. So we've had, for example, throughout history, people making reference to how the Broederbond brought together the corporate, the military, and the political. But that's been under a very clear transition. Some would like to argue that it actually remains pulling the strings, the white monopoly capital. But I began to panic last year as the order of 94 was crumbling. That in fact, our grand narrative-esque approaches of looking at the high society of South Africa were too simplistic and not paying attention to the nuances and the changes that had taken place. How the political settlement of 94 started a process of transforming that elite, but also how we've seen rises of diverse groups like black-controlled groups of power elite that leverage political players, how they continue to contend with the so-called white monopoly capital. And an interesting one for me, Stephen, is the increasing power of union bosses in state, in crucial sectors of the state that are central to the economy, such as, for example, ports, rail, and others, and how that is an emerging power that needs us to explain today because it's got real consequences. So the point that Mills makes, if you allow me, he says the power elite is composed of men whose positions enable them to transcend the ordinary environments of ordinary men and women. They are in positions to make decisions having major consequences. Whether they do or do not make such decisions is less important than the fact that they do occupy such pivotal roles. And lastly, he says their failure to act or their failure to make decisions is itself an act that is often of greater consequence than the decisions that they do make. And look at how, for example, processes to transform certain sectors that are still controlled by the state now are more complicated, with union bosses very much being part of the power elite and countering, in some instances, the managerial elite, or having same power and same alignment in terms of thinking. So it's something I'm simply inviting us, especially within the political sciences and related disciplines and in the media, to begin to say, let us understand the new ways and the old ways in which power is wielded, and so that we can be able to go in this closer where the crux of the matter is in terms of how we transform society in South Africa.
An exploration there of the book The Power Elite by C. Wright Mills, published a long time ago about a country far, far away, but has such insights into how South Africa works. That conversation with Ongama Mtimka.
702.
The best of the Money Show from this week.
Personal finance this week. Warren Ingram, the financial advisor and co-founder of Galileo Capital, talking about how to invest when markets are behaving as they are. There's been some speculation that US tech shares might be in the middle of some sort of AI-driven bubble. Gold has been going great guns. Warren sharing some strategies for navigating quite difficult markets.
If you look at the JSE as an example, we've got our market is performing very well, but when you break it down, it's a handful of mining shares and then the Naspers process, a combination, but pretty much everything else is doing okay. I mean, the JSE is probably having a fairly normal year. But when you look at the index tells you that it's having a phenomenal year. So there is a lot going on inside the JSE, and I think exactly the same picture is unfolding in America, where you've got those tech shares that are just driving everything through the roof. But there are a bunch of other companies that are doing okay, probably a lot more expensive as an average than South Africa, but still, two separate markets. I think I saw an analyst talk about the bifurcation of the market, and I guess you have to say that phrase very carefully on radio. But certainly, it looks to me like two different parts of the market performing differently throughout this year, and probably will carry on like that for a while.
Okay, some strategies to consider. Where do you sort of start? What do you need to work out? And I imagine first you need to know what you're actually going to do. You need some clarity in your own mind.
Yeah, I think I know you love the phrase, in the investment journey or the financial freedom journey. So just to really double down for you, I think when you're going in a direction, you need to know where you're going. And it sounds like such an obvious thing to say, but a lot of the time when you talk to people about investing, they'll invest opportunistically. They'll see an opportunity in maybe a falling price. I keep thinking about Steinhoff, getting lots of phone calls once the share price had halved, and people saying, gee, isn't this an opportunity? And equally now, when you look at the tech shares or maybe the cryptos again, people going, well, hang on, these things have gone up a lot. Shouldn't I buy in so that I don't miss out? And all of those are kind of questions that you should ask second. The first question is, what am I doing with my strategy? Where am I going with my money? How do I want to invest? And then have that plan, and then make decisions following that plan. And I think that it's fair to say with the world of investing, sometimes like a fairly bad plan that's well executed is way better than no plan at all, where you just sort of aimlessly try and take advantage of opportunities, because you end up not making any good decisions, and every now and then you're lucky. And what happens with that little bit of luck is it fools you into thinking that you've got this, that you've got some kind of a skill, and really all you've done is you've flipped the coin, you've landed on heads, and now you feel that you've got this. So I would say we don't know. You and I and no one else will know exactly how these market conditions unfold over the next decade, and we can't wait for a decade to look back and go, oh gee, that's what we should have done. We have to make decisions now, and to me it starts with just set a plan, just set a course for yourself, which includes, well, how much money do I actually want in shares? How much do I want in bonds and property? How much am I going to have overseas and in South Africa? And once you've made that decision, and that should be based on your age and your tolerance for risk and all of those things. But once you've got that kind of a plan, then you can start to say, well, if I've got too much in shares, and I think the market's expensive, maybe I should sell down my shares a little to get back in line with my plan. So the starting point is have a plan, and even if it's not the best plan in the world, stick to the plan. That's the thing that will get you through whatever's coming, because none of us actually have a clue what's coming.
Yeah, well, isn't that the thing? Okay, so if we, put our hands over our eyes and sort of, cast and look at the horizon, you can kind of see a big wave, right? And it really does sort of feel like that. That it might crash. But isn't there, you can ride a wave in a situation like this? How would you do that?
You can, and in fact, fund managers will talk about momentum investing, and that's exactly what it is. You take advantage of building momentum where more and more money chases a particular investment theme. And for a while, it becomes almost a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy where the demand and the speculation around a sector or a share builds its own power and its own force. And that drives the price higher and higher. And very often, those prices can go much higher than you think, and also that momentum can last for a lot longer than you think. And so, I would say, betting against the wave altogether, or betting against that momentum would not be the best idea you've got. You shouldn't just look at the tech sector in America and say, okay, well, all tech is expensive. I'm going to go and, buy wood manufacturing furniture, wood furniture manufacturing, whatever it is, the thing most different to tech. Because I think, making an all or nothing bet against a very big wave, I think is very dangerous. So one, you can ride that wave for a time, and maybe one of the strategies that you follow is, if you've got a big allocation to a sector that's doing very well, don't be scared. Every time it does well, let's say it goes up by 50%, that you take half of that money off the table and you allocate it elsewhere. And if it goes up again, the remaining money, you keep taking profits, because at least in that way you are riding the wave, but equally doing so responsibly and allocating money elsewhere. For me, that would be one sensible way of riding a wave. But what I wouldn't do, and I'd be really strong on this, is don't take everything that you've got from all the other parts of your investment portfolio and allocate it to the wave. Because if we talk about big wave surfing, and you've ever watched a video of it, when you get it wrong, it's catastrophic, and certainly you don't want to do that.
So, I mean, there are things that you can do that are just wrong, and that's really where you put your money in the wrong place. So then you might be tempted to say, well, actually, I'm not going to do very much. I'm not a big believer in AI, or, it reminds me of the kind of .com bust. I've watched The Big Short too many times. I mean, what happens if you opt out?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting strategy. A lot of people don't have a tolerance for losing money. It causes them sleepless nights. They stress about it. They become obsessed with any time they see their investments go down. And so when you read what's going on in the world right now, and let's face it, I mean, if this was a British sitcom, it would be called Men Behaving Badly, and that's what's going on all around the world. Is we just see politicians behaving terribly everywhere, and certainly investors, chasing limited number of shares that, and delivering, yes, very good returns, but we all know the valuations are high and getting higher. And so for people who are prone to stress and worry, it's very tempting just to say, I'm going to cash out. I'm going to sell all my shares. This thing can only end badly, and I'm going to store my money in cash, maybe in some gold, although I'm not so sure that that's not in a bubble of its own. And I'm going to wait for everything to kind of sort itself out. I'm going to wait for the markets to fall, and then I'll consider investing again. Now, it might feel like a good call, but the thing here is that the markets could carry on doing this for the next 2 or 3 years, especially if we see interest rates coming down in the US and maybe even in South Africa. And falling interest rates give huge impetus to stock markets. And so if you're sitting in cash, what you've locked in is the certainty that the buying power of your money is eroding every single day, because inflation eats the value of your money. Your interest rates never keep pace with the inflation rate. So yes, you can opt out. I don't think it's a good call, because you're kind of, this time around, you're not betting on heads, you're betting on tails. And if it lands on heads again, then you really are losing out. But it is one strategy that some people follow. And certainly someone like Nassim Taleb, who wrote Black Swan, this was more his philosophy. He would sit in cash for a long period of time and then try to take advantage of a big opportunity. And unfortunately, it didn't work for him. His investment company didn't do so well. And I guess he is a fairly bright man. So the likelihood of making good money out of this over a long period of time, I think, is extremely small.
Warren, a question from Eugene for you tonight. Hi, says Eugene. I have a large outstanding home loan. I know I need to build an emergency fund. Should I focus on paying off the home loan, or should I build the emergency fund first? Warren, I suppose Eugene's question is really about interest.
It is, and it's one of my favorite topics, because I think if you're disciplined with your home loan, one of the things you can do is, you should always be doing it anyway, but you should try and pay extra money into your home loan every month. And if you get a bonus or some kind of an extra payout, drop that into the home loan as well. And what that does is it either reduces your monthly payments, or if you keep your monthly payments the same, it reduces the term of your bond by years. And you could get to the position where you have a paid off home within 12 years instead of 20 if you're disciplined. Now the trick here is you can always use that extra money that you've paid into your bond as an emergency fund. And for me, if you are disciplined around this, then it's my favorite place for an emergency fund, because the likelihood is that you might be paying prime or prime -1 on your home loan. And so any extra money that you store in there, I would view it as almost earning interest. You're saving yourself, let's say it's 9.5% or 10.5% a year. And the extra bonus here is it's tax-free because you're saving interest instead of earning it. And so you're getting kind of a guaranteed return of nearly 10% a year, one way or the other, tax-free. And what you're doing is you're allowing yourself the opportunity to knock the time down on your home loan, but making sure that the home loan is accessible. You can always get that money in the event of an emergency. And we always talk about this as, it's your emergency fund. It's not a planned expense fund. So you're hoping never to use this money. And so keeping it in the bond is a great idea. And so I would say to Eugene, you focus on building the emergency fund in your bond, and you're hitting two birds with one stone, and very few times in the world where you can do that so successfully. But this is the one. And it's probably my favorite personal finance tip for people with home loans.
Warren Ingram there, the financial advisor and co-founder of Galileo Capital, offering some insights on investing during these really quite tricky times.
The best of the Money Show
on 702.
702.
Two principals for you tonight in Investment School. Vincent Anthonyrajah, the CEO of Differential Capital, and David Shapiro, the veteran stockbroker and chief global equity strategist at Sasfin, talking about the AI boom and the gold rush, understanding bubbles and safe havens. We know, of course, people are still chasing AI. The valuations of those firms are tremendous. At the same time, the gold price has broken all records. How do you manage that tension between risk and safe havens, and when do you need to go and find stability? Vincent and David both having strong views.
It's very difficult, but you know it when you see it. and strangely enough, I feel there's more a bubble in the gold market than there is in artificial intelligence in the US stock market. And the reason, I think, is that AI is more a technology which is a once-in-a-generation issue. Whereas gold at the moment is becoming much more of a FOMO deal. I don't need it, but I want it. I've got to have it. And we get to the psychology of the investor at the moment. I don't think that things are all that bad in the US as people are making out in terms of the diversity deal. But the fact that gold is going up like it is, and Stephen, you only have to look at some of the charts. And believe me, I'm not a technical analyst. I don't draw charts and kind of measure gains and losses. I love to look at charts to see the direction. But when you start to see this absolute blow off in gold and gold shares, that does make you worry a bit. So from my point of view, I'm a bit concerned about gold. But just one other point that I must make. The fact that markets are going up and gold's going up is actually quite a positive sign, and the US dollar is not falling in a heap. It's given up about 10%, but there isn't any kind of panic. So overall, it's not all that bad.
Vincent, how would you define a bubble? I mean, we're talking about something that can cost people a lot of value.
Yeah, I think for me, a bubble, signs of a bubble start to emerge when there's massive amounts of potentially unjustified optimism into any asset, and where you start to really stretch the optimism. So I think our risks of a bubble higher than they were probably 18 months ago? I'd say yes, the risks are higher. But like David said, I mean, before I jump into that, I think there are things that are positive out there that are kind of propping up the story. So, back to the definition of a bubble, I think it's when there's unjustified amounts of optimism starting to creep into valuations.
So that would include gold or AI, but it can happen with both.
Yeah, and it could happen with other stocks too. So, I think looking at both, there's solid arguments in favor of the valuations. Let's look at the AI stocks right now. They're actually producing the numbers. There's no doubt about it. The revenues are growing. the application, we can see it in day-to-day life, the adoption of AI, etc. Obviously, the use case and productivity is starting to come through as well into other areas of the economy that will probably pay, the kind of subscription fees that the AI companies are hoping they'd get. So there's definitely evidence of that. And so that's on the positive side. On the negative side, what does concern me a little bit about the AI phenomenon right now is sort of this closed and probably unhealthy loop between the companies that are getting the huge valuation. So if you take someone like NVIDIA, which is starting to invest into some of the companies that it vertically integrates with, i.e. the data centers and cloud, providers themselves. So it's getting these massive revenues. It's investing in these companies that buy the chips from them. And there's this slightly circular economy starting to emerge in the AI world, which is something you have to watch. You have to watch. It does concern me a little bit. It's the one element of, let's call it the fundamentals, that reminds me a little bit of the dot-com type bubble.
David Shapiro, the idea of a bubble is that a market gets overheated. So people are kind of following each other. And you used the phrase FOMO with relation to gold, fear of missing out. It is all about the fact that people are following each other, right? I mean, that in a way is one of the requirements of a bubble. People must be worried that they're missing out.
Yes. In fact, it's the psychology of the market. Not necessarily at the institutional level, but at this moment it is affecting the institutions, because many of the funds that never went into gold feel compelled to now buy gold, because pressure will be put on them by their investors. You haven't got gold. Why haven't you got gold? Gold's been performing so well. So you're almost forced to take some kind of a stand. And, Stephen, what interests me is that even if we look, and I'm going to gold at the moment, you know who the biggest holders of gold are? Is the United States. And we can go back to the gold standard. We can go back to Bretton Woods and then on to the 1970s when Nixon took the US off the gold standard. But they've still got massive amounts of gold. And in fact, they still value it at $42.22 an ounce, which was the official price. It's now $4,000, but they haven't revalued their assets. But still, going back, everybody believes we've got to have gold, and the pressure becomes, is put on investors just to take a stab at gold. And what do they take? 4%, 5% maximum. That's not really going to change the perspective of where they're invested, and so they say, okay, we'll just take a few percentage, but that builds on itself and starts pushing up the gold price. And there's one thing that I've learned. I came in to the market in the early 70s. And the one thing that I've learned is that when things start to slow down and people get bored with gold, it doesn't give you a return. And especially if you geared up means you borrow money to buy gold. Obviously you're not getting a return out of gold. So it starts to hurt if the price doesn't keep going up. And that's when you get the big unwind. And believe me, having tracked gold for so many years, when it falls, it falls. And you'll probably see the same thing now in platinum and maybe even silver, which has gone up a huge amount, dragged up by the performance of gold. So that's the big worry when you go into assets that don't give you anything, or that don't have a balance sheet in which you can actually analyze the performance. Vincent told you exactly about AI stocks. They're still doing something. They've got a revenue stream. Gold, platinum, silver doesn't have any kind of revenue stream.
Vincent, gold, as I understand it, the main reason gold is where it is. They're short-term reasons, but the long-term reason is central bank buying. And so that must be something that is a fundamental shift.
Yeah, I think that's that. But I think the other one is that, the weaponization of the dollar by the US. That's an important one. And that's the reason driving the central banks. The other component is for, most of my life as an investor, the US Treasury has been the risk-free asset. can you honestly look at it now and say it's the case? I would say no. So in the absence of a risk-free asset, you've got something like gold that's come in, again, for central banks as an alternative. The one thing that I'd caution on the positive side of gold is, I would agree with David, when you start to see massive amounts of institutional investment being forced into gold, you can see it in the ETF market. Right now, that participation is actually quite low. So the scary thing is, when the real panic sets into the institutional investors that actually haven't got the exposure, and this grinds up, then you can see a real squeeze. So I think gold might actually have one leg up left in it.
It's my favorite thing when investors disagree. It's the whole reason the show exists.
It's the market, yeah.
It's the whole reason the show exists. Can we talk a little bit about safe havens and growth assets? So you're in a situation where you want to grow your money, you want to save your money as well, you want to make sure you don't lose it. And so on the one side, you've got money going into a safe haven, and on the other side, you've got money going into AI, which is not really speculative, I suppose, but you do need to strike that balance. David, from what you say, you would just get rid of all your gold, or would you keep some of it to try and strike that balance?
I come back to what is a safe haven. If you're going to be a safe haven, then be a safe haven. If you're going to cross the ocean, then don't cross it in a dinghy. Get a steamliner or what do you call it, a steamliner, and cross in comfort. What I'm trying to say is that if you're going to put 5% into gold as a safe haven, that's not a safe haven. You're taking a 5% insurance policy. And that's where I criticize the so-called safe haven deal. It's what does that happen? Because if the rest of the market comes down, the 5% safe haven isn't really a safe haven. So if you really fear markets, then you've got to get out of markets. You just get out. If you feel that AI is going to fall in a heap, well, then get out of everything and put it into cash or something else like that. Otherwise, see it through, because I still think that markets are perhaps the least risky asset that there is. And time has proved that. Over time, if you've had your money in so-called equities, it's been by far the best safe haven that you could have. It's much more bulletproof than any of the other assets around. Whether it's, I know gold people are going to come at me, but gold is a once in a decade type or once in a 15-year type experience. But overall, I think equities are far less risky than anything else, even bonds and that, which have got which can be very, very volatile. So that's what I'm saying. What is safe haven? For me, equities are safe haven. Controversial, but yeah.
A deep dive there into the AI boom and the gold rush, understanding bubbles and safe havens. Vincent, Anthonyrajah and David Shapiro on Investment School this week.
702.
The best of the Money Show from this week.
Your shapeshifter this week was Noleen Samuels, the co-founder and owner of bioCURE, a first-generation entrepreneur looking at how to help companies deal with their waste and become a big player in the waste management industry. She also spoke about her history and how her parents played a big role in helping her and giving her the confidence to found and run bioCURE.
Fortunately, I didn't have to come up with the idea all by myself. I had the opportunity. I was working as a sales rep in the waste industry, and we were specializing in odor control. And the opportunity came my way to procure the distribution rights for the odor control product. And that's where bioCURE was birthed. It wasn't me coming up with this brilliant idea, but with a product that I had at my disposal. And we then went on to solve some problems in the waste industry. And that's how it all started.
I mean, the problem that people have is that their offices and their workplaces generate waste and it needs to go somewhere. And then on top of that, they do, I think, genuinely, A, want to be responsible, and B, corporates being corporates, they want to tell everyone they're being responsible about it. So you've got that on the one side, but you actually need to find out what to do with this stuff on the other.
Exactly. And there's a lot of education that needs to happen. In fact, the general public don't really know what happens to their waste. When you flush the toilet, where does it all go? And when you put your rubbish in the bin, what actually happens to it? And with the growth of cities and, where we're living and just how people are using the spaces, waste is generated at an enormous rate. And it is a challenge for those that are managing facilities to actually keep up with the demand. And we are running out of landfill space, but we are also just populating areas more and more. And so there is a bit of a struggle and a lot of education. And so these property management companies and those that are in the industry really just need solutions for some of the challenges that we face.
I don't know how much of your business model you'll give away, Noleen, but what is your solution? I presume you collect the stuff. Where does it go from there?
Yes. We collect one element. We actually specialize in liquid waste management. But what we actually prefer to do is to partner with other waste companies, but also mostly with facility management. They are the ones running these buildings, having to navigate tenants, the public, as well as stakeholders that don't want to spend too much money on waste, as you can imagine, and also do the right thing and the sustainable thing. So we partner with different companies and we come up with solutions for them. And we don't actually do the waste management side of it, but we do partner with waste management companies. And we actually do the odor control side of it mostly to take away offensive odors, and we treat the air with green products. But we also do liquid waste management, which is becoming more and more of a challenge. And that is where we actually partner with sustainable facility sites that take the waste and generate biogas, fuel, and also composting. There's all sorts of things that happen that can be, the waste can be utilized for.
So I know waste can be used for lots of things, and a coffee cup will say it's recyclable and you put it in recycling, but it takes energy and money to then do something with it. And I'm sure it's the same with liquid. So is that an issue? I mean, is there a cost to you for managing it?
There is a cost. So we have to pay the disposal facility to actually receive our waste. That gets passed on to the customer. And so there is cost at all levels. The customer pays us to take the waste away responsibly. There is some bylaws and things where, from the waste management side of things, where facility management companies have to comply with these bylaws. So there is some pressure on them to handle the waste responsibly.
Okay. And I mean, do you find the way in which people want waste to be managed and the way in which the waste is coming, is that changing? So I suppose what I'm asking really is, are there different things to manage in your business? There are different demands and a different kind of product that needs to be recycled.
So in our business, we have solutions to treat the waste, which is always the ideal. If you can handle the waste at the source and treat the issue at the source, that's first prize. We try not to handle too much waste. If we can solve the problem on the liquid waste side of things, if we can actually provide the product that breaks up some of the fats in our case, we don't have to then remove a lot of waste. So it's always best to go straight to the source and try and solve the problem there. But there's always many things or many components to this challenge, because there are different points along the way that has to be managed, from legislation to your customer having certain requirements, all the way down through to the waste disposal facility that has to accept your waste. So there are many people that you need to many areas that you need to navigate at any given time. And then you've got the labor force that has to actually carry out the services, vehicles that have to be maintained.
Yeah, there's all sorts of things that have to happen. All right, Noleen,
Yes.
you didn't just magically arrive one day and become the owner of bioCURE. LinkedIn, which is a social media service that still seems to be surviving. LinkedIn, you say on LinkedIn, in fact, your first job was at a video store quite a long time ago. I mean, video stores, I think, gave a lot of people their first job.
I'm giving my age away. But yes, I started working when I was in high school already. And my first real job was at a video store. And I had to be there on weekends and deal with customers and manage the store and all the different elements of it. And so I was thrown into customer service at a young age.
I mean, video stores, I think, have a particular place in a particular set of culture. I mean, people made movies about working at a video store because there was a little bit of time, but there was access to popular culture. But you also were face to face with customers. How important was that first job for you?
It was absolutely instrumental. I think after that, I continued in the customer service industry as a car rental agent. And at a young age, I was given a management position to actually manage a branch at some stage. And even there, I was then dealing with tourists and customers coming at you face to face. And it was invaluable because there's nothing that can really prepare you better than actually face to face with a customer and then having to deal with them and all the different personalities that come your way. And then making sure that they walk away with a smile on their face and that they feel like what they are getting it far exceeds what they pay.
Noleen, where do you...
Yeah,
I mean, that idea that people walk away, that sense of how they feel when they walk away, I think is so important. Where had you grown up before that? What kind of community had you grown up in? Where, I suppose I'm really asking the old South African question. Where are you from?
Where am I from? I am from I was born in Mitchell's Plain. They call it the Plain. For the first 7 years of my life, I grew up there. So my foundation years were spent in Mitchell's Plain. And then moved around and ended up in Athlone. So I always tell everybody the short answer is I'm from the Cape Flats.
And the community that you were growing up in, I mean, there are different parts of the Cape Flats, obviously.
Yes.
I mean, obviously, we all carry our communities with us in so many different ways. Which part of it were you growing up in? What was it like for you?
So when I was born, it was still, there were riots and things going on, and I don't remember it very well, but I grew up in that era in a blended family. So my mom and dad had 2 kids each, and we actually grew up, I grew up in a blended family, being the youngest of this family. And so the community I was in, my parents were very involved in church work, and we always had people in our home, and our home was always busy and always open to others. And so I grew up in a community where there was the sense of just serving people and generosity, and I didn't feel like I was missing out on anything. I really felt a sense of belonging and community, and we knew our neighbors and we could play in the street, and I felt safe. And as things went on, growing up in the Cape Flats and we moved to Athlone, and then I experienced some gangsterism and there were elements of that. But by and large, I feel like I really grew up in a secure environment, even though I was in the middle of the Cape Flats where all this was going on, but my home was safe.
And I mean, obviously, your family would have given you a strong sense of confidence from what you say, the community that you were a part of.
Yes. Mom and dad were, I believe they were my first mentors or my first examples or the people that shaped me. And dad was always working. He was a sales rep, and I learned a lot. He used to take me to hardware stores with him sometimes when he would call on his customers. He had a really strong work ethic, and he was really good with people. And my mom, she was always doing something for others, and she was always, I would say she taught me how to hustle in some respects. If we needed some money, mom was selling Tupperware, or we were doing demonstrations on the weekends in the mall for pots or we were making Easter eggs, just to top up the funds. So they were my first examples of, I think, mentorship and work ethic and all those things that I carried with me.
Noleen Samuels is the co-founder and owner of bioCURE and your shapeshifter this evening. And Noleen, you were telling us about your family, the impact your parents had on you. Was running your own business something you were thinking of while you were growing up, or was it? I mean, most of us have careers that are really the result of lots of different decisions we made because we thought at the time it was the right thing to do. I mean, would you describe it like that, or was there ever a vision in your head of, actually, I want to be in charge?
For myself, I think I had access to leadership roles even in high school. So early on, I took a chance on myself and stepped up for leadership roles, which I think kind of started me on this path of really just, taking a leap of faith every time. And I think I'm a product of lots of people that were willing to take a chance on me. And through the process, I wouldn't say I always dreamt of it because I didn't really have that growing up in my world. There weren't many entrepreneurs to look up to, or even business owners from where I come from. You were told to go into a career and stay there for 30 years and get your long service award, and hopefully you can retire. And that was kind of what was spec'd. So there wasn't this growing up like this dream. But I do remember very clearly when I was working at the car rental company, and I made a joke one day and I said, I'm actually going to have my own business one day. And it was more birthed out of a desire to earn my own salary. I was selling, and I knew that people were buying what I was selling, and I wanted to control that. And so that was really what I thought entrepreneurship or just owning a business would afford me, is I can then earn what I really want to earn.
Our shapeshifter this week, Noleen Samuels, the co-founder and owner of bioCURE, about her entrepreneurship journey. You've been listening to the best bits of The Money Show, a digest of some of the most important conversations this week. If you'd like to hear more, please go to our website or your podcast app and search for The Money Show. Thanks for being with us this week. I really appreciate it. The Money Show back with you 6 o'clock on Monday. Have a good weekend.